Hi, it's Anne. Welcome back to Art on the Creek. Thanks for joining me on Saturday Review Day. I have noticed on social media that this product is starting to get a resurgence in popularity, so I thought we could take a look at it again because I do have the set of 36. I am talking about the Gansai Tambi Watercolor set. Are you ready? Let's see what's so unique about this one. Okay, so yes, it is big, and that's the first thing I want to talk to you about. This is a set of 36, and the box measures 7 3/4 inches by 12.5 about. So that's pretty substantial. This is something that you could carry it with you, but the paints are pretty loose in there. Let me show you what it looks like when you get it. Now, of course, mine's not brand new, so forgive the use marks on it. Here we have the swatch sticker that it came with, and I just ended up putting that in here. It is a plastic tray that comes inside to keep things in place. And you'll notice right away how big these pans are. Let's pull one out here. They're just sitting in here. These are cardboard folded ridges to keep them in place, and then you have 4 across, but they're just sitting in here. They're just loose. Each one has a number on the bottom, corresponds with this, and then these are color names. I did do a Google Translate on this, so I've got some other news for you. Can you see how shiny these are? I think that'll really show up on camera. The thing that's interesting about these, now let me show you one thing. Wait just a second. Before I talk about the shininess, I want to talk about the size of this pan. It's very large. Here is a standard half pan compared to the Gansai Tambi pan. So huge difference in size, same depth, but you can see the Gansai Tambi pans are not filled all the way, and that's okay. This size of pan is actually really convenient because when you're working with your brush, you have all of this room to go in here. When you're using your brush on a half pan and the brush exceeds the size of your pan, it can wear your brushes down a little bit prematurely. So just be aware of that. I know most people use a lot of half pan sets, but full pans, if you can get them, full pans are the way to go. In fact, I'm looking to convert my half pan sets to full pans, but that's on another subject. So back to these really beautiful color range. Let's look at the swatches, and you can see the swatches even have this sheen to them. Now what I did was I took a dropper and put a drop of water on each pot of paint, and then I let it sit for a good 5 minutes before I used it. It was as thick as model paint. Do you remember the Testors model paints? That's really what this reminded me of. It's a very, very thick liquid when it's had time to get ready with that water on it. And this is just straight without watering it down. So you get this shiny effect with the paints. Now you can use this like regular watercolor and you can water it down, but I wanted to show you the unique properties of this paint. I hope you can pick up the shininess there, particularly here on this ultramarine pale. So let me read you a little bit about these paints. They don't really flow. They're not like your traditional watercolor. They're best for wet on dry. So in a wet on wet technique, they're not really made for that. You can use it for that, but it's not really made for that. They are formulated to use on rice paper. So the big appeal for the American market, I think, or the Western market, I should say, is in journaling. That's why I have this stack of things out here. This is, everybody has an old Danielle Steele book, right? A lot of times you can see these book pages in journaling, and I have some dilutions by Ranger, a popular brand, of some journaling papers. But I wanted to show you how this would work, how these paints work when you're journaling. So we're going to do those tests first, and then we'll do the tests on watercolor paper. And I think you'll see they're just a little bit different. So this one I wanted to open because it is black paper. And these are typically made of good heavy cardstock. They're not watercolor paper typically. You can get watercolor paper journals like this, but this one is not a watercolor paper. So I just want to show you, I'm going to use a number 6 nylon brush. And then let's get into the gold here. Now I did not pre-wet these paints. So let me zoom in and you can see, do you see how thick and rich that pigment is coming loose from the pan? It's just so, it really is luxurious. And then that can let us do some really fun techniques here for journaling. So if you're into journaling, these are really fun to have. Let's zoom out here and we'll go to this yellow here, which is their lemon yellow. Let me make myself some space here. I want to zoom in so that you guys can see. Now I just have a wet brush, and the little bits of orange on there are from some little misses where I've put a paintbrush that wasn't quite so clean in the yellow. But so let's paint over here by our leaf. Zoom out just a touch. Let's do a little lemon. So you see the paints move around a little bit differently on this paper, but I'm not getting any buckling at all. Now I'm going into the sap green color. And we'll make a couple leaves here and a little stem to come out. So you'll see they just kind of sit on top of the paper, but then they blend a little, right? You're getting that, but it looks more, it doesn't really look like a watercolor blend because the colors aren't really mixing. They're sharing space is how I want to phrase that. So these paints will work for you on journaling paper fairly well. Let's see what it looks like on plain paper, meaning not black. If you're working on, say, a bullet journal or something and you just wanted to do a little bit, let's just kind of do a little vine on the side or something. Now I'll go into their Hooker's Green. And all of these paints, I don't mean to hide this from you, but all of these paints are going to re-wet that same way and have that real thickness to them. So let's just do a simple little vine here. And some leaves. So, you know, if this is something that you think you would enjoy, if you are a journaler, then my hand gets so shaky when I do little leaves like this. You might really like this Gansai Tambi set. And let's see, let's add something that I really love the reds in this set. They're just beautiful. This one is the Rose Madder Deep. I'll just do some little flowery type things here. So you can see it really acts well on this paper. There is no buckling there whatsoever. Now this is a really thick cardstock type paper, so let's try that book. I'm going to go in first of all with the rose madder. So that is one huge benefit of these paints. You really don't have to pre-wet them. And this book was published probably in the 80s. Let's see. Oh, I apologize. This book was published in the late 90s, 99 and 2000 is when this one was published. So the reason I want to bring that up is because sometimes paper changes through the years, and you might end up having you know, different quality paper depending on how old the book is. So this one is, you know, new enough to consider it modern. So let's just see what we can do with a little bit of a leaf on our little rose here. And what else? Let's put in a stem. I'll go to one of these darker greens. And we'll go into that rose madder dark again, and let's put a little rose bud over here. Add some dark petals into this rose. So you can have a lot of fun with these paints. Let's try, well, this is damp here. And we'll see what that ends up looking like. Just want to do a little bit of green here on top of this guy. There. Now you can really see that with that rose bud that we did, how the paints just kind of swirl around together. They don't really do a traditional wet on wet that a watercolor might do. I'm going to do all of these same tests now with regular watercolor, and we'll get out some watercolor paper and compare the two of them together. So far, really great for journaling. I would definitely give these a 10 out of 10 for journaling paint. If you are a Bible journaler where those pages tend to be thinner, let's test that out as well. I'll go get some of that paper that's similar to that. This is a very old dictionary that I got from my aunt's house when we were cleaning it out, and I already had my dad's dictionary from the 40s that I still use and can't part with, so I decided that I would use this one. Sorry for the extreme close up there, that I would use this one for art purposes. So let's see, here's a page I've already torn out. In fact, I think I used this for my amaryllis. So let's try another rose on this dictionary page. This time, let's do some yellow. I'm going to go into this Aureolin, I think is how you say that, because it's such a beautiful yellow. It's a nice gold. I have some of this in an M. Graham paint, and I love it. The M. Graham is a little bit closer to this over here, but I love this shade here. So let's do a little yellow rose here. Now I can zoom back in. Now this would be similar paper to a Bible, if you are one to do some Bible journaling. Now I'll go into the Yellow Ochre and try and add some little bit of dimension to that rose. I've got this paint pretty wet. It's really, well, it's thick. Okay, Google Translate. One of the things that it mentioned in there, and I'll just get this one out of the way because it was clearly lost in the translation. If your face sticks to your clothes, it won't fall off. I am betting that that means don't get this product on your clothing because it may not wash out. So just keep that in mind. The rest of it is pretty much care instructions, and I'll get back to those in just a second. So there we go. You can kind of see how that looks on a journalish page, a Bible journal page. There's some warping. It does not go through, but can you see the amount of warping? Let's just look at the history of it just a little bit. Let's see what wisdom can I impart to you from my notes here. Kuretake is the brand name. Gansai Tambi, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I hope that I am. Gansai Tambi means watercolor in the traditional method. So Gansai is the pigment mixed with the resin, creating that solid little pot of paint that you have. So that is the Gansai. And then Tambi just means in the traditional styles. So I think kind of how it works together with the Gansai meaning traditional watercolor and Tambi meaning aesthetic, it's kind of in that style of traditional Japanese watercolor painting, the things that you have seen maybe on scrolls or on silk, things like that. So this paint, bottom line, it's so fun to use. You can use it on so many different papers, and with 100 different colors, you don't have to mix. It really is convenient, and it's a lot of fun. You just kind of have to play with it a little bit and figure out that it's a slightly different animal than watercolor. But honestly, since you can paint on papers that aren't 100% cotton, it really gives you a lot of freedom. Now, I am a huge proponent of using watercolor on 100% cotton paper. In fact, I think that paper is more important than a brush. But something like this, that even comes in these graphite colors, I think this will open up your journaling or card making world tenfold. These paints are just so easy to use. They're easy to re-wet. In fact, let's take a look at everything we've painted today because I think it's had plenty of time to dry. Let's see what we've got. And let's just do some comparisons. Same brush. We'll start here. And I'll try and do a very similar vine. There, I've got that paint about the same thickness, and let's see, we'll just kind of come up about the same way. Ooh, I was pressing too hard there. We'll put some leaves on. I have to reload my brush a lot more often with regular watercolor on this paper. And then we'll go in with this red here, same kind of consistency, and we'll try and do these little blooms. And right away, as soon as I touch the green pigment, I'm picking it up and pulling it into the red, which didn't happen over here. And of course, the other big factor that I think you guys can see is the transparency. Traditional watercolors are much more sheer than the Gansai Tambi. I'll pull this up closer so you can see. The one on the left is the Schminke, and the one on the right is the Gansai Tambi. Now, as far as warping goes, this particular paper is again a cardstock weight, and I'm not getting any warping from that. Let's take a look at our dictionary page. Same thing, we'll try a yellow rose, and I'm going to use the warm yellow on here. Now this paint is sitting on top of the dictionary as well. I don't know what kind of ink is on this here, but you know, magazines kind of went to soy ink there for a while, and it just kind of changed the way that if you're a journaler, you'll know that if you're using an old book, it's going to act differently than if you use a more modern book. So I can definitely feel that this paint is sitting on top of this dictionary page here. And in fact, you can kind of see there's a little resist there. If you're working with children or doing your Bible journaling as a family activity, you'll be happy to know these paints are AP certified and safe to use. All right, so there's the comparison of the roses on the dictionary page. We have the Schminke on the left and the Gansai Tambi on the right. They're both kind of wet, so you're getting a shine on both. I'm gonna let this dry because I'm not sure that that's gonna stay that way. So let's let that think about what it's done. We'll just put it in a timeout over there. This is the Black Dilutions Journal. Again, it is a cardstock weight, and you can see the sheen that we've already picked up from that. Let's do another lemon. This time we'll use the Schminke Lemon Yellow. Trying to get the paint really thick like we were able to get with the Gansai Tambi just to make it as fair as possible, as a fair comparison as possible. Another note about the Gansai Tambi paints is, just as in regular watercolor, when you close them up and put them away, you want to make sure they're completely dry before you put that lid back on. A stem and a couple leaves, and right away you can see that paint just wanted to travel very quickly right into there. And it is in fact doing that. Now over here the paint kind of went this far and stopped. So that is a factor that's quite different. Let's take a look at the Fine Tech. Now they call this gold in their Gansai Tambi, but it's more of a bronze. So which one would be a good comparison? Let's just do the warm gold and let's see. Now I typically spray these paints before I use them, so I might have to agitate this for just a while. That's pretty good. All right, let's zoom in here. And we'll do another leaf like this one. Now, if you're journaling and you like to use iridescent paints, or if you're a card maker and you like to paint on cardstock, look at the coverage in the Gansai Tambi. It is so much better than the Fine Tech. I love my Fine Tech paints. I use them often and I really like them for accenting watercolor. But this one, I think, would be your best bet. Honestly, the Gansai Tambi, and they do sell the set of just the pearlescence, so that might be the way to go. If you are a card maker and wanted to add some of these paints like this to your arsenal, I think this would be a way to go with that. Now it's time for our rose test. Danielle Steele did soak through. I'll tear these pages out because I'll use them for a card or something. Go back into my thick paint here. And that worked out just fine, actually. Again, it's pulling that red and wanting to mix. And you can see the green trying to travel into the red a little bit, which is what I would expect with watercolor. And what else did we do? We did a bud here. Let's do this bud up here. All right, so we'll let those dry. I have a handmade journal here and I want to test the paints on this before we go on. Just kind of been playing a little bit, so let me repeat this test this direction with some of this. Now these are my Schmincke Horadam paints. Let's try just filling in a wash. And let's mix, we'll get some ultramarine blue to blend with that. Just putting the colors right next to each other. They're not really making an effort to actively blend them. And now let's try the same thing with this Rose Madder Light. The one thing that I couldn't find on the Gansai Tambi paints is anything about actual pigment information. It may be on there, it just may be written in Japanese, and I may not be able to read that. So I'm not saying it doesn't exist, I'm just saying that I was unable to find it. I couldn't find it on their website either, but that also seemed a little bit awkward in the translation. So not 100% sure on that. So now let's see, this is Schminke up here. Here's Gansai Tambi. Let's try the pearlescence. This is the pearlescent white. And I will tip that to the camera. I can see it beautifully, but I'm not sure if you guys can tell. And this is the gold. It's an interesting gold. They call it a bluish gold. And it's kind of, well, I want to say it's flat, but that's not quite the right description for it. This one I would call more of a bronze, and they just call it gold. But let's take a look at the Finetech ones. This is the pearlescent white. Put some of that up there, about like we did the other one. And then the two golds I have a warm gold. I love this one. This is like my favorite. And then this other gold here. All right, so those are the Finetechs. And now let's do our rose test again. This time I will start with the Schminke Horadam. Got a pretty thick, juicy amount of paint on here. I'm trying to keep the consistencies of these paints pretty equal so that we can compare. You know, more fairly. Let's see, what should we drop into there? Let's drop in some lemon yellow. Just a little. And then I will come in with the green, and we'll do our little, what are those things called that come down around the rose hip? Any rose aficionados out there? I love roses. I cannot grow them around my home because we have so many deer. But I have had many. Get that to blend just a little. I'm just really kind of throwing this sketch down very quickly, just to see what we can get here. And then into that, I want to drop some ultramarine. Okay, now let's try the Gansai Tambi. And for that one, we'll use this Rose Madder Light again. That one looks more like a peony than a rose, but that's okay. And we'll drop in some of their lemon yellow. Didn't rinse my brush very well. It does act differently when you try to mix. The colors tend to sit on top of one another rather than actually mixing together. So I'll do that again with the green here so that hopefully you can see. Let's do this for the little stem bit. And then some leaves will come up here. Get that to touch. All right, and now I want to go in with that ultramarine and kind of drop some of that in there. So you can definitely do the same techniques that you would do with watercolor. It's just simply going to act a little bit differently. Let me label these here. We'll call this one Schminke Horadam and this one Gansai Tambi. And this down here is, let's draw a line here. This up here is Schminky Horadum and Fine Tech. And this is all Gansai Tambi. All right, let me get all of these tests dry with the heat tool, and then I will be right back. Well, I think we've given these paints a really fair test. Let's just go over what we've discovered here. First of all, on the Dilutions by Ranger, the black journal paper, here is Schminky Horadum, the lemon that we did, and then here's the Gansai Tambi. It would be advantageous to you if you do like to journal to use the Gansai Tambi because there's warping. I can feel it. I doubt you can see it on camera, but under here with the traditional watercolor, there is some warping and you get a lot of blending, and which is a great property in watercolor, but here it's not what we want. And the lemon just turned into a green fruit. Could be a lime, not really sure. But over here, it kept the lemon color. And feeling this, it almost feels like nail polish. There is that lacquer in there, so that is a factor. This is a different look with the Fine Tech paints here. This one is Fine Tech, and this one is the Gansai Tambi. I prefer the Gansai Tambi because it's nice and smooth. Here you've got your brush strokes that show up. And again, the brush I used is the Princeton Neptune Heritage line. It's an artificial filament, a man-made filament. So maybe if I used a different brush, the brush lines wouldn't be there. But this is paper that the paint will sit on the surface and just kind of push around on. Interestingly enough, I wanted to test the white. On the left here, you have the Gansai Tambi, and on the right is a Chinese white that comes in a lot of watercolor sets. This one, I think, is the Winsor Newton Cotman set. Can you see that the Gansai Tambi has some sheen to it? I'm picking that up on with my naked eye, but I'm not sure if you can pick that up on the camera. That is really a nice effect. And again, if you're a journaler making cards, the white in here, the regular white that they have, would be really nice because it just makes that snow sparkle just a little. So for this paper, absolutely, I prefer the Gansai Tambi. And that was reinforced with this here. Now that this has had a chance to dry, you can see the journaling pages. This one would be a lot more pleasing to look at than this one here. This is your traditional watercolor, the Schminky Horadum. We got some beautiful blending and things when it was wet and it was looking really good, but I think for this purpose on this paper, the Gansai Tambi would be better for you to use. And again, watercolor is not meant to be used on this kind of paper, so that's where you can see. And once again, you can see, I hope, that sheen that's over here, as opposed to the matte finish on the watercolor. Now let's look at our book pages. This is the Schminky Horadum, and don't worry, I'm going to make Valentines out of these, so they will get plenty of use. And there's a little bit of sheen there where I had the paint really thick. Not much warping. Some of the paint came through the other side, but that's okay. I will make a nice Valentine out of this. And here is the Gansai Tambi version. Not much difference, to be honest. So if you're working on book pages, I don't know. I would say this one's a toss-up. The only difference maybe that I would see is I like the leaves on this rose better. A little bit of buckling. About equal, I would say. And then here on the dictionary page, this is the one that I thought was so interesting. You can really see the shine on the Gansai Tambi rose. I hope you can anyway. There's some shine on the Schminky Horadum rose where the edges are with the paint. Now that's the other thing. We have some hard edges here on this rose where I dropped the color in, but not over here. So once again, the Gansai Tambi would be my choice if you are Bible journaling and are looking for a watercolor to use in the margins of your pages. I think that the Gansai Tambi set would just be lovely. And here's our test on the homemade watercolor paper. Let me cover this portion up so we don't get confused. All right, so the Schminky Horadum and Fine Tech here are on the top. Now the Fine Tech watercolors, I like their sheer capacities. I really love these paints. On watercolor paper, they are my favorite. They just truly sparkle. These go a little bit flat. Do you see how that bluish gold just kind of, that's why I was having trouble deciding what color it was. And this one here, well, I mean, it says bluish gold. I know what color it is, but that's why I was having trouble figuring out how to describe it. This one is not nearly as shiny as the Fine Tech. Now, the white pearlescent one, about equal. Those are about the same. This color here, this is the mix of the Gansai Tambi when we did our washes. I can see that the ultramarine, it's got a sheen to it as well. And again, that is that lacquer that's in the, or shellac rather, that's in the Gansai Tambi. And it's a look. I mean, it's very shiny right there along the edge. Whereas here we have a flat matte view, which is what we always get from our traditional watercolors, unless they're the mica paints or pearlescents. And then on a rose here, same thing. There's a beautiful shimmer, a sheen to this one here. And this one is just, you know, it's a little more matte. But to work with on this watercolor paper, I much prefer the Schmincke Horridum, by far. You can get watercolor effects out of these and it will work. But I think that if you are looking to paint something to make this your watercolor set, I think you would be a little bit in for a different journey. I'm just going to say it that way because it may not be frustrating. It might be something you really enjoy quite a bit. But I think that for journaling on paper, like so, or on in your bullet journals, I think the Gansai Tambi set will really shine there, especially on black paper. So that is my take on the Kuretake Gansai Tambi watercolor set. If it's something that interests you, maybe you want to check out one of the iterations. Thanks for joining me for this review, guys. This was a lot of fun. Something different. Take care. We'll see you next week. Thanks again for watching my review of the Gansai Tambi watercolors. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider sharing it with your friends, give it a like, and leave a comment. Thanks again, folks.